Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. And I got a I got a good show here tonight on Strange Reality with Dave Emmons. And he's a buddy that I haven't seen in a while, and he's been busy. And I just thought of him. I saw a program that we did here a while back. It must have been a year or so ago, and he was on there. And I said, "Well, why don't I give David White a call?" And that's my guest, David White, and give him a call and see what's going on with him. And he's had a lot going on. He's moved and he's been doing things. And him and I were just getting into some politics, in which we're not going to get too deep into on this show, but we might do it on another live feed show sometime soon. We're going to talk about a little bit about the politics, but we will mention politics when it comes to the drone phenomena. We'll talk about that. And David has theories, not theories, but maybe some facts even to share. He hasn't told me everything about the drone phenomena, but we're going to get into that and here on the Strange Reality. And I'm glad everybody's tuning in. You've been supporting me very well here on Facebook, and I appreciate that. I'm hiring some admin people to get me on YouTube and get that going. I want to enlighten people. I want people to know what's out there. And it seems like to me we have so much disinformation, misinformation going on. And even with this latest thing, these poor people, 67 people who lost their lives in that plane crash, or you can say, yeah, it was a plane crash. A helicopter and a plane, a commercial plane, 67 souls, and that's really sad. And it's actually they're saying the helicopter was flying too high in the direction where the plane was coming in. That's the preliminary thoughts. But I think David has might have some ideas on that too. Uh, David White is a he's a researcher, and I like the work that he does. He does a lot of work. He's a writer, and I'll tell you a little bit about him. And David, just say hi to everybody for now. I just want to say, you got a,
Hi, everybody.
yeah, you got a bookshelf back there. Most of those are your books.
Two of them.
Two.
Actually, three of them, four of them, five of them, but you can't see all of
Yeah,
them.
I usually
Yes.
I usually hawk my books on the show
It's,
myself. It's like this one here. That's my newest one. We were supposed to meet. It's a sci-fi. It's a love relationship between a Palladian ET and a Native American Indian guy who's a handsome hero in this whole story. So, and of course I've written a book, what do they want? And that's my UFO stories, my background. David knows about that one, but this new one, he's not seen. So I just wanted to show that flash. I'm hawking these books. I'm being cheap here. I got to get all the marketing I can get. If you people know
sure.
book publishers and marketing people, I know David does. They're expensive, and you try to use a marketing thing with them, you might make a couple of thousand, but you're going to spend 4,000 just to get the book marketed. So you're going to be in a hole 2,000. So here we
Could be.
go. Yes, and we had a good discussion on politics, and I've got I didn't tell David this, but I got a couple of guys at the gym well, I work out. Yes, I work out. I'm old and I try to, get it in there a couple of times, 3 times a week. I got a couple of guys. We have different political views, and these guys are same as David. They voted on the same side he did, and I voted for the guy. I'm a little bit upset about President Trump about this thing. We'll talk about that too. But I talked to these guys at the gym, and we said we're not going to really relate in politics, and we get along just fine. I think David and I is going to be doing the same thing. He's very rational about what he says, and he has facts and not just opinions, but he has facts to back him up, and he has a mind and a memory that blows my mind for sure. I can't even think of names sometimes of movie stars. Of course, I'm old. David's young. David White studied at Northwestern University. He worked with the late Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the noted Blue Book astronomer. David is a
Oh, no, wait.
what's that?
Gotta make it accurate. I studied with him. I didn't work with him.
Okay, he worked.
He was one of the professors at Northwestern. And just to give you an idea of how the UFO situation has evolved, when he was a professor there, his his agreement with the university was that he could not mention the word UFO or aliens during class time.
Wow.
Right.
Oh,
So he would have these Friday night meetings with select people from his astronomy classes at the observatory that Northwestern had built. God, I think it was the 1890s, on the lakefront back when they still had dark skies.
right.
Of course, in the 1970s when I was in school there, and I'm not that young a guy, Dave. I think you and I are within a year or two of each other.
Really?
They
You,
didn't have the ability to see much with the telescope, but because it was after hours, we could talk about UFOs.
you mean
And
if I use the telescope to look at you, I can tell your age?
possibly. So I will tell you this one story because I still remember this 50 some odd years later. Um, I got to ask him one question one time. And I said, what's your best evidence on how UFOs are propelled? And he said, this is, 1975, 76. And he said, one of the things that really interested him and some of the other UFO researchers was that UFOs sometimes look like something in a mirror, where if you move the mirror, the object looks like it's moving, except it's not moving. It's the mirror that's moving. And I said, what does that mean? And he goes, we don't know.
Uh,
We don't know what that means,
what is
but
the
that's
mirror?
what it looked like.
What's the mirror supposed to represent, David?
Well, it's possible that their ideas of propulsion are not the same as our ideas of propulsion.
Yeah.
For example, when you see planes, the reason that you can tell when a plane is not a UFO is because we don't have any silent aircraft. We have the most advanced propulsion systems in the world. And even the B-2 stealth bomber, the B-21 Raider, all the way back to the U-2 and the SR-71 Blackbird, they scream through the air. I mean, there's like, I think there was a comment by a guy in Los Angeles who saw the first, they call it donuts on a rope contrail
Yeah.
of what we think might have been the Aurora stealth plane. He said it sounded like somebody was ripping a zipper through the sky
Wow.
because we think it was pulse detonations from behind this stealth aircraft.
Okay.
We can't make a quiet aircraft, but you look at these UFOs that can go from spot to spot and they don't make a sound. They can hover silently.
Mhm.
We don't have that capability. One
Well,
of the reasons that this drone issue was not aliens,
yeah.
was not some special technology, is because you could hear them and you could hear the airplanes too.
Well, the thing
So
don't you think that they could mimic that sound, David? Let me talk about you some more. I got some more good things to say about
no, 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 no.
you.
Don't talk about it. The only thing you need to say is that I've recently done a lot of writing on YouTube channels.
Great
One is the
topic,
infographics channel.
short
The
stuff.
other one's the military channel.
Uh-huh.
And right now I'm working for a website called theconspiracyreport.com.
Right.
And if you want to get an idea of how I operate, there are other writers on that website. They will make a comment like, I heard this guy say this, or this guy said this in a speech, but they won't say where it is, when it was. They won't give you a link where they got it on the website. But if you look at the 25 or so articles I've written for them, I footnote everything. If somebody says something, I'll tell you where I got it, why they said it, when they said it. And I try to go through that like with the drone thing. If you want to get into the drone thing, we can dive into that real quick, real
Let's.
fast.
I was going to say, David. David White's my guest here, and very knowledgeable about a lot of different stuff. I mean, he just blows my mind with his memory. And if he's about as old as I am, I give him kudos for that. I mean, great job. But yeah, let's talk about the drone thing because a lot of people listen early on in the show, and
Right,
sometimes after about 15, 20 minutes, the internet,
right,
the society today,
right.
it's quick.
Okay, so we have to go back to the early days of the SEAL team program. They had two SEAL team programs, SEAL Team 1, SEAL Team 2. There was a gentleman named Richard Marcinko, who was a Marine who was decorated for his service in Vietnam. He was asked to start another SEAL team, and he decided to call it SEAL Team 6 because he wanted to confuse our adversaries, specifically China and Russia, as to how many SEAL teams we actually had. The SEAL team leaders were only supposed to serve for 2 years. Marcinko served for 3, and then he was about to retire when the Navy Admiral James Lyons asked him to create a different group that would be designed to test base security, both here and overseas. So Richard Marcinko started a group called Red Cell. And Red Cell was designed to use basically any means necessary short of murder to infiltrate U.S. bases and prove that our security was lax. Well, he did such a great job that he basically had his group, Red Cell, defunded, and they basically brought him up on Trump charges and made him serve some time in jail. And when he got out, he proved that, these were trumped up charges. Red Cell then was basically deactivated. Shortly thereafter, the CIA creates their own group called Red Cell. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the CIA group was only supposed to be an investigative information group. But we know since the war on drugs and the oil wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that the CIA has gotten more and more heavily involved in drone attacks. At one point, they were carrying out more drone attacks worldwide than the rest of our military combined.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
During the Obama administration, he relied heavily on CIA drone attacks.
Right. And Ukraine right now, that's what they're using a lot is
Ukraine is destroying Russia's oil infrastructure with their drone attacks. It is staggering how many drones, and most of this now is programs that Ukraine has built from the ground up in their own country. And Russia basically doesn't have a counter to this. Their Air Force, their anti-air weapons systems are being knocked off, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 in a week, and they can't replace them. Their country is so vast that they just can't put out enough anti-drone equipment to stop them. Right now, they're having to try to decide, do we want to protect our very limited oil infrastructure or the frontline troops, because they don't have enough to do both.
Okay, let me get into the drone thing. I'm going to state some facts and things that I've learned, and then I want your rebuttal or your reply or whatever. Number one, President Trump let us down. He said he was going to disclose the drones a day after he was inaugurated. That didn't happen. But Tuesday, his lady spokesman, the young gal, the youngest spokesman I guess they've ever had, she told the public that the drones were recreational, they were experimental, they were FAA approved, and she said that a lot of other groups like drone groups and stuff joined the bandwagon and just started flying, at night. And I kind of think, and then she said these were experimental and other things. She didn't say what the other things were, but then they come up with this excuse. They were looking for nuclear, I guess some kind of nuclear residue across the New Jersey. What they said there was something so stolen, but that was debunked because drones are all over the world. They're in Russia, they're in India, they're in China,
right.
They're everywhere. So that debunked that. Here's the other facts that I'm looking at. Well, Trump said the same thing that Biden said. He has no argument over what Biden said. Biden said the same thing Trump did when he said they're recreational, they're FAA approved, they're not our enemies, and so that's
you're missing one key ingredient.
What's that?
Both presidents said they're not military.
Yeah.
Okay, they might be telling the truth because they might be CIA drones. The CIA has never said this was not them. You have to also go back to 2019 when there was a drone swarm off the coast, about 100 miles off the coast of California, interfering with Navy operations ongoing at that time. Those are not recreational. Those are not civilian. And it appears that somebody was testing whether I think there was a couple of destroyers out there, whether they'd be able to handle 6 drones. They couldn't handle 6, let alone 60 or 600, which is what Ukraine is doing now.
Right.
After that, there was drone incursions in Nevada. Yeah. There were drone incursions in California. There was a very significant drone incursion, basically a 17-day lengthy incursion over the area near Langley Air Force, or Langley, Virginia, which is where the CIA's headquarters were.
Right.
And all of these appear to have been targeted against military facilities. These are not kids playing around with drones. Some of the drones that they saw in New Jersey and that area were the size of cars.
Yeah.
We're talking $30,000-$40,000 drones. Now,
but David, they were flying in neighborhoods, and they was looking at people's windows, and people were scared to death. And
Yeah.
the public is scared to death. Why doesn't the government answer this crap and
Okay.
get it out of the
Like,
experts finally?
like, right. Like I was getting to there, and what she said was partly true. Yeah, there were a lot of other people that started flying drones around too, but a tremendously large number of drone reports were just erroneous reports. We got a guy from, was it Maryland, who said he was photographing an ex-governor, I believe it was, said he was photographing a drone swarm over his house when his aides had to tell him the next day that's the constellation Orion.
Oh my
There
God.
were people photographing planes landed, jet planes, and you could hear the engine. Oh my God, listen to that drone. Oh my, it's no,
But
it's an airplane. You could
there,
see the flashing lights. It's FAA controlled. It's airplanes.
but
However,
there are a
however,
lot of film though. There is a lot of film that was taken legitimately, and they do
yeah,
strange looking. And let me tell you a little funny story. You were talking about people, filming jets. There was a guy in New Jersey. You might have heard this story. This happened about a month ago. And this guy, he's about our age, and I guess he's pretty good with a pistol. Well, he had a drone flying in his neighborhood, and what he did is he shot it. He shot twice, and he hit it and knocked it down. And when the police got there, they checked the drone, and the drone was a Walmart delivery.
yeah. Okay, so as I was saying before, the CAA has a red cell team. They're supposed to be informative, research, advisory only. But we know that the CIA has long ago given up any pretext of trying to follow its charter. I mean, they've done so many things that were against their charter that they should not have been allowed to proceed, probably past the Eisenhower administration. Eisenhower was mad at the things that they were doing illegally. So we also know that the CIA is one of the most advanced groups in the United States military industrial complex that operates drones on a regular basis. And we know that these drones didn't start last year in New Jersey. They started at least in 2019 and were around CIA headquarters in Langley in 2023.
I heard they
We
started in UK and in England. That's where the
Well, there were other ones in other places as well. Yes. But again, they were against U.S. military bases. And it's quite possible that this is a CIA program kept away from the military on purpose so that they wouldn't spill the beans about who was going to be targeted. And they're showing that we are totally incapable of defending against drone swarms. They're not Iranian. I guarantee you, if there was an Iranian ship launching drones off the coast of the United States, the Coast Guard would consider it a feather in their cap if they could prove that. And
yeah.
they would be glad to fire at them if they found them doing it.
Let me
But
state
one
a
of our
few
problems,
characteristics of a drone, and then you can come back and talk to me about this. The characteristic says that actually there's a commander with the Coast Guard who filmed these drones coming out of the ocean, and they come out of the ocean. They're pretty good sized drones. They're underwater, and they said there's a mothership outside of New York. There's one in the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico, and then
thank you.
there's one off of San Diego coast. But these are motherships, and they said those drones come from those motherships and are flying in. The other thing that I heard is they don't have a heat signature, they don't have a frequency signature. They turn their lights off and they go invisible to radar. And also they tried to shoot these frequency guns at these drones, from what I heard, at Langley Air Base. They tried to shoot them with it's a big bulky looking gun. It's a frequency gun, and they couldn't touch them because they're not into the frequency that they're using. So
Well, we know that Ukraine and Russia are both using wire-guided drones now, which can't be jammed, so the frequency guns don't work. We know that most of the drones that were filmed were using lights, so we know that this is not, Iranian, because they would just not run their lights; they would be invisible. It's very possible if they're using batteries that they're not going to have a signature. They're not going to have a heat signature because they don't have exhaust.
they aloft
Um,
7 or 8 hours though. They stay in the air for 7 or 8 hours
yeah.
night
Oh,
long.
yeah. Well, okay. The big ones can carry big batteries.
Yeah, sure.
Heck yeah, they could probably fly all night if they wanted to.
Okay, what's this
So,
rumor about a couple of colleges have invented zero energy and anti-gravity propulsion?
um,
They invented that, and they're taking claim to some of this.
there are Air Force, I believe, patents out for things like zero energy, but they're complete theoretical. Nothing that we know of has ever done that. One of the things I try to explain to people is if you look back at the Balkan War during the Clinton administration in the 1990s, we brought out two military craft that were not ready for prime time. One was the F-117, and the other was the Apache AH-64 Black Hawk helicopter. The only U.S. military deaths in that entire conflict were from two pilots, pilot and a co-pilot, weapons officer, on one of the AH-64s that crashed, which led to them being unallowed to fly. And the other one that was anything close to that was when an F-117 got shot down. And it got shot down because the guys with the shoulder-launched missiles could hear it coming, and they waited until it went overhead, and they shot a heat-seeking missile at its tail exhaust. We then realized, oh, you can't fly these things near the ground, guys, because they'll get shot down.
Yeah.
Okay. If we had any, and the reason I point that out is because if we have anything that we can test militarily, we'll test them, whether they're ready or not. And Kosovo proved that. We tested two military weapon systems that were not ready to be tested, that still had bugs in their system. We've been doing the same thing with the Osprey. The Osprey has crashed so many times that at one point they stopped allowing officers of a certain rank to fly on the Osprey because they were losing too many people and they were not reliable. We still have problems with things like the F-35, which, because of operator error, even the smallest mistake can cause you to crash.
How about a secret, shadow government operation? I heard that Werner von Braun started this a long time ago, and they got a space program that's way beyond what we have, and they can fly to Mars and the moon all the time. And
yeah. There's a guy that was on I can't remember if it was the Gaia Network who claimed that he had gone to Mars and spent 20 years there working at a secret base, and then came back through time so that no time had passed. And then he did that a second and a third time. And it's laughable. It's just laughable. The reason that you can prove that we don't have any secret bases on the moon or Mars is because there would be gases, there would be CO2, there'd be heat signatures. We have every square inch of the moon covered now with satellites, now that China is able to land on the far side of the moon. Now, up until the time that we could put a satellite over there, we couldn't actually see what was on the far side of the moon. So everybody claimed, oh, there's bases over there. There's not. Okay. We wouldn't be able to have a base on the moon without all of the thousands and millions of amateur astronomers being able to photograph it.
This is for entertainment purposes only to the platforms out there and the people that a lot of these things that we're talking about, we don't know for sure what's going on out there. And they keep a lot of it from us. History is not what we think it is. And so the moon landing, they said that we never went to the moon. And we had Buzz Aldrin coming out saying in a news conference to some young lady reporter, she said, how was it going to the moon? And he looks at her and he says, we didn't go. And so, and then you got
no, I've never heard that. In fact, I know that Buzz Aldrin was being stalked by a guy who wanted him to swear on a stack of Bibles that we never went to the moon. And Aldrin was so pissed off that he finally punched the guy in the nose.
Really?
So no, I've never heard Buzz Aldrin say that.
I saw it on a documentary on the internet, and he's saying it.
Yeah, I would push back against that. I don't think Buzz Aldrin has anything but the highest regard for the moon missions that we went through. Now, there are other mysteries about the moon missions, but the fact that we went there and left material there on the surface, which you can now see with the telescope from the ground, you can now ping the moon with a laser, if you have a good enough laser, and it'll send a return signal back. Even the Chinese and the Russians have seen our stuff on the moon. If we didn't go there, who put all of our stuff on the moon?
Yeah.
Now, one interesting conspiracy theory that is really fascinating, there's a documentary called Room 327, which you can get on YouTube, which talks about Stanley Kubrick and the possibility that he may have filmed part of the moon landing. Now, it doesn't actually say that Kubrick does this, but it does say that Kubrick at least referenced that throughout the movie The Shining. And he literally takes the original Stephen King book and makes it about faking the moon landing.
Well,
Now he's not admitting he did the moon landing, but he's every step within like an inch of admitting that. He
didn't
has a kid wearing an Apollo 11 hand knit shirt, sitting on the ground playing with trucks and cars around a specially designed carpet that looks like the launch area where they would launch the Apollo missions. And when he stands up, he's showing an Apollo 11 rocket going up into the air. The reason it's called room 327 is because the room where he then goes and sees like the scary lady in the bathtub that Jack Nicholson's character later sees, they named it room 327 because 327,000 miles away was the distance of the moon from the Earth at the time they made the film.
yeah,
And there's one really
Kubrick,
interesting ingredient.
David,
When Jack Nicholson is being interviewed by the guy who wants to hire him to run the hotel complex for the winter, they're sitting in a room with a window in the background and an eagle in the window. And you can see the light pouring through and all. Off to the left is a little table against the wall, and there's a CB radio with an eagle in the shadow.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when Jack Nicholson gets up from this, he leaves the room, turns left, walks around this way, turns left again, walks around this way, and does a third left. And when he walks behind where that window is, there's a hallway there. There's no outside window. Stanley Kubrick did not make a mistake. Stanley Kubrick was deliberately saying this eagle in the window is fake. He's saying the one in the corner with the shadows, that's the real one. Now, you marry that up with the first press conference that the three astronauts gave after they were brought out of quarantine. Yes, thank you. There are the three of them, Conrad and I can't think of the third guy's name. See, I'm not always perfect when I come up with my names.
Cooper was earlier, I think.
That's Cooper. Yes. So Mr. One Small Step for Man, One Giant Leap for Mankind, Neil Armstrong, he and Cooper are fielding all the questions. And over on the right is Buzz, and he ain't saying jack. He's not saying a word. And he's like looking at the table. He's like pissed. And both Cooper and Armstrong, they look upset. It's not clear why they look upset, but they look upset. They don't look heroic. They don't look happy. They don't look relieved. Yeah. They look like they're mad.
I saw that.
And this interview goes on for an hour, and these two answer all the questions, and Buzz just sits there, and he's ready to scream. It's bizarre. And near the end of this interview, they ask him if he'd like to add anything. Neil finally looks over because he's on Neil's left. He goes, "Do you want to add anything to that?" And Buzz goes, "We just wanted to do our job. Why wouldn't they let us do our job?"
Yeah.
And neither of the other two astronauts gainsay him. They don't disagree with him. They don't argue with him at all.
Yeah.
And the only explanation behind that, if you put that together with the fact that NASA overwrote the original tapes of all the images shot from the moon. Number two, the fact that the images that we see are the only record, and they were shot from a monitor in Australia by somebody with a handheld camera, which is why the clarity is so bad. And number three, they wouldn't do a live feed at NASA. What they did was they fed it to a giant monitor in the control room, and the major news organizations, ABC, NBC, CBS, all had to film from this giant monitor.
Now, didn't Kubrick give some kind of did he die here lately? Did he give a deathbed confession about
a few years ago? Yeah.
And we're talking about technology here, what we think we might have and what we don't have. And you did a good job explaining that. Let's get back to the drones. I got some questions about the drones. I mean, it's like, okay, there's 4 different types of airborne things going on in New Jersey, New York.
I have to interrupt you for a second. It was Michael Collins who was the second astronaut, and Buzz Aldrin was the guy on the right.
Cooper was an earlier astronaut.
Cooper was an earlier one, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Gordo.
But these there's 4 elements that I see, David, in these drones. There are regular drones. There are drones up in the air. And what they're doing is monitoring the other drones that are weird and probably scientifically out teched the other drones. And then you have these white orbs that are flying around, and these are what they call the UFO orbs. And then you have the plasmoids, and the plasmoids are interdimensional. They come in our dimension, and they're big around, and they have all kinds of energy floating around in them, and that's because a proton and neutron in the center. They have thousands of electrons flowing around the one proton and neutron, causing it to be so energetic and so powerful that these plasmoids can almost produce anything or shapeshift and do anything. They said
I,
that the orbs did the same thing. Now, explain that, David.
well, I should say that I sound sometimes, especially in my writing, like I'm a denier of UFOs. I'm here to say I 100% believe we are being visited. I have on two occasions seen orbs with my children. At one point, we saw two brilliant magnesium flare colored UFOs at the end of our driveway, less than 200 feet away, that were so brilliant they looked like landing lights for a 747.
Yeah.
And they hung there motionless. Now, this is when I used to live out in the country in Indiana. We had nobody within a block of us. And across the street was nothing but empty fields. There's no community within miles of where we were living. It's not a reflection. They were not drones. They were not Chinese lanterns. I swear they were the most bizarre, amazing, terrifying, fascinating things that you could ever see.
Mm-hmm.
And we had already seen an orb the previous year that was like an orange globe way off in the distance that blinked out as soon as we turned our eyes off of it. So that wasn't a Chinese lantern either. Also wasn't a helicopter. So this time I told my kids, okay, you go to the front room, you watch this through the window, and then when you've got eyes on it, I'm going to come through and I'm going to go outside. And when I have eyes on it, you can come out and we'll leapfrog so it won't turn itself off while we're not looking. And while they're inside putting their shoes on, I went outside, and between the distance of me going around a big maple tree in our front yard and the other side of the tree, they blinked out.
Oh.
Now, that couldn't have been done by a drone. That couldn't have been done by an airplane. Those were definitely orbs of some sort. And they were definitely saying, look, we can turn ourselves off and on at our leisure. We wanted to let you know we're real. Okay? If these drones were that's what they do. I mean, you know about the big UFO that was spotted over Stephenville, Texas,
Yes.
back in 2007, I think it was.
Yeah, I met that gal at a conference one time, the newspaper reporter. Yeah.
Okay, so this thing was showing off to people. They described it as the size of a super Walmart. It had flat sides. It was flashing glyphs like it was trying to communicate to the people on the ground. Mm-hmm. And when apparently the people in Fort Worth decided they had had enough, they sent a couple of F-15s up on afterburner to chase this thing, and it screamed off to the west-southwest and overflew the Bush Ranch, which at that time was called the Western White House.
Right.
Illegal airspace. You can't violate that airspace. Faster than an F-16 on afterburners. Sorry, F-15 on afterburners. And then they tried their best to cover it up. The FAA wouldn't release any tapes. They said, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't have anything. And MUFON had, the Mutual UFO Network, had to continually go back to court and say, we would like to get the radar transcripts of this event. And at first they said, well, we don't have anything on radar. They went back to court. They said, well, we got something on radar, but it's just the F-15s. They went back to court. Well, we have the F-15s and this other object, but nothing unusual. They went back a fourth time. And at this point, the judge is like ready to start throwing FAA personnel in jail for defying him. And they finally released the tapes that show something on radar that when the F-15s are coming close to it, it disappears off of radar and it's way over there, like it just blipped over.
I saw that.
This is not these drones. These drones are drones. They're drones. They're drones.
About orbs? What about the orbs, though? And
well, like I said, I've witnessed orbs firsthand on two different occasions. Those do exist. It does not appear that that's what this is. And like I pointed out before, with the two different red cell units, we know that our military, and I believe, our CIA are testing our bases to see and prove that we are not ready for this kind of warfare. One of the problems we have with drones is people trying to shoot at them. But you've already noticed that people mistake planes for drones all the time, and you don't want people shooting at airplanes. We also know that you can put anti-drone devices near airports, but it's possible that some of this anti-drone electromagnetic warfare might interfere with the guidance systems on the airplanes. So that's a little risky. And currently, drones are covered by the FAA, so it's technically illegal to shoot at drones.
I was going
For
to say
that,
the FAA is, contradicting itself. It said the White House said FAA approved drones and these flying vehicles, whatever they are, they've been FAA approved. But then last week, the FAA made a law saying if they fly over any military base or anything, they're going after them. They're going to find out who they are and arrest them. But that has never been done. And now
right? Well, did you notice as soon as that happened, the drones stopped? If these were aliens, they'd go, sure, shoot at us.
they haven't stopped, David. They CBS and Newsmax has actually said they've had the story about giant motherships the size of football fields, like I said, off the coast of New York and off the coast of the Gulf of Mexico and off the coast of San Diego. They have them there, and they said they've seen them. They've had the military see them, and the military and the Pentagon actually said that there are ET bases under the sea or under the seas. So,
Well, wait, hold on. You say the Pentagon has said.
yes,
What is your source for that?
that I've seen it on it's on news. It was on, actually, I think Newsmax they was talking about it, and then they said how can they contradict themselves?
Okay,
There's not.
if you have a guest that says the Pentagon has said, then you have to go back to the credibility of the guest. There are guests, like I pointed out, Gerald Posner on the Kennedy assassination. They can't always be trusted. So one of the things I wanted to say earlier on, and we didn't get a chance to, there are two quotes I want people to remember. There's one quote by Einstein when he was working at Cambridge University back in the 50s. Some reporters decided they wanted to show how smart they were. So they asked Einstein what his address was. And Einstein, without saying a word, he goes over to the phone book and he starts going through the phone book, looking through the E's. And one of the reporters laughed and said, "What's the matter? You can't remember your own address?" And Einstein said words to the effect, "Why would I clutter up my mind with information that I can find somewhere else?" Okay. And what he's saying is he had trained his mind to just focus on the important things, but to remember where he could get that information if he needed to. He made some other quote somewhere, which was the only thing you ever had to know was the address of the nearest library. Okay. That was during the time when we didn't have an internet.
Right.
The other quote I want people to remember, and I have made sure my children remember this quote. There's a guy named Alvin Toffler, who's a futurist, sort of like H.G. Wells, who said the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who can't learn, unlearn, and I'm sorry, I'm getting it wrong. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read and write, but will be those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. So we are being tasked on a daily basis with trying to figure out what the truth is.
Right.
And we will hear things and we will think that's the truth. And then we'll find out, no, that's not the truth.
Yep.
Like the Kennedy assassination, we were told it was a lone gunman. He was a nut, blah, blah, blah. It turns out, so this is something I wanted to also introduce because I'm researching the Kennedy assassination now because supposedly new documents are going to be released within the next week or so.
I hope so. Unredacted. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how unredacted they're going to be.
Yeah.
One of the people that I listened to was the former assistant director of the assassination files. And his comment was there was no smoking gun there. Not to be, morbid about the whole smoking gun situation. He said basically what we have are small pieces that can close up some of the holes in the giant jigsaw puzzle, but you're not going to find the answers that you want. We aren't going to have them.
Okay, you're going into our other subjects, and these are subjects that I was looking forward to talking to. I got one more thing about this drone situation. New Jersey officials, the governor and the mayors of several big towns in New Jersey, they're making complaints to the White House. They're sending them letters saying that they didn't like what they heard when they said that they were recreational, FAA approved and everything. These people
Sure.
are saying, these authorities there in the state of New Jersey and New York are actually
Mhm.
coming out and saying we want a further truthful explanation from the White House.
And they're not going to get it.
Yeah, they
I'm
probably
sorry to say. So, okay, I don't want to be political, but I have to bring out the facts. If there is an ability to prove guilt or even cast shade on your political opponents, both parties at times at different levels will do their utmost to blame somebody else for a problem they're responsible for.
Right.
Now, we've already seen that the military has said this is not us. And the military has said this very directly and very strongly. The CIA hasn't said a word. Okay. It's very possible that this is an ongoing program about which both presidents are not allowed to speak. I guarantee you, if this was something that the military was screwing around with and they should have not been doing that, the current president would have blamed the previous administration for that. He would have leaped at that
Yeah,
opportunity.
that
We've
happened.
seen how quickly he's tried to blame the previous administration for the tragic accident that happened in over the Potomac, even though his own administration fired the head of the FAA security last week and put up a big blurb on their website. The current president has made sure that the wokeness of the FAA has been eliminated. Praise be to our leader. And then they had to take that down today. He also fired a bunch of other people, and he's trying to reduce their numbers.
Well, the
And the
numbers,
real problem we had was the guy that was in charge of the convergence of those two aircraft. He was working two jobs because we don't have enough people to man the jobs.
it's supposed to be 30
And the reason I bring this up,
Yeah.
bring this up because our current president used that opportunity to blame the previous administration. And if he could do that over the drone situation, even if it was military, he would go right ahead and do it, but he hasn't. And I believe that's because it's an ongoing issue. You're going to see 6 months from now more drone swarms over some other location, which will also be a military base. Could be Fort Hood or whatever they're calling it now in Dallas. It could be someplace in Washington State. It could be someplace in Florida near Pensacola. Who knows?
Well,
But we've watched these drone swarms progress around the country, and every time they've jumped up, they've been specifically coordinated with a military installation or installations below them where it appears someone's trying to prove that we can't defend against these things.
well,
And one of the ways we're going to be able to defend against them is we have to change the FAA law, like they're doing right now, saying if you overfly a military base, we can use lethal means to knock them out of the sky, which we have not had as a law before. And I'm not sure if that has to go through Congress before FAA can just declare it. We'll see.
yeah, well, you were talking about the number of, I guess, these tower watchers, these people that are watching out for the airplanes and everything. Uh, there was only 19 of them working, and they're supposed to be 30 plus. And so this
Yep.
Trump inherited that. He didn't that was done way before Trump come in.
It's because the Republican controlled Congress wouldn't approve hiring more people. We've been on a downstretch with these people since COVID because they just haven't been able to get more people back into the system.
Yeah.
Let me shift real
And
quick.
this is for entertainment purposes only.
Theoretical, not hard concrete proof, although I back it up with, if you look at my, and I hope you're going to put up a link to the articles I've written for the conspiracyreport.com, where I have all of these articles, and these articles have footnote after footnote after footnote, so that you can see where if I come up with some evidence, I try to point you where you can find that original evidence that I used.
The narrative, I'll put that in the narrative when I post
I
it.
appreciate that. So there are two things I wanted to point out to people that we are not going to get the truth from because the truth no longer as a document appears to exist. One of those is the Kennedy assassination, where we've had people like the CIA director William Schlesinger back in the 80s admit that he had deleted thousands and thousands of documents about MK Ultra And we believe he did the same thing with any Kennedy assassination files. And the second thing we're never going to get the truth about is Roswell, whatever crashed at Roswell. But we can have proof that a cover-up did occur in both situations. In Roswell, for example, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff went to the GAO, the Government Accounting Office, and asked for a review of all documents throughout the government on what happened with Roswell. And the GAO came back and said, hey, a funny thing, all of the incoming and outgoing communications for Roswell Army Airfield, which is what it was before we created the Air Force in 1947, all of the incoming and outgoing documentation and communication for that base from, I want to say it was late 45 into 48, disappeared. Poof, gone. They said, we don't know who made it disappear. We don't know why they made it disappear. We don't know how they made it disappear. All of their communications gone. That is proof of a cover.
I'm going to have Jesse Marcel Jr. on the show next month, about the middle of the month. And I've had him on my show before a couple of years ago. And one of the things he said, he's an entrepreneurial guy, very smart guy. He gets into avionics and everything else, and he's an inventor or whatever. But his dad was a doctor also. They're all smart people. Jesse Marcel Sr., the grandpa, back in 1947, when Jesse Marcel Jr. was 10 years old, around that age, he went fishing with his grandpa, Jesse Marcel from Roswell. And there was fishing on this bank by a lake. And he turned to Jesse, there was only 10 at the time. He said, son, and he said, looked at him, said, yeah. He said, they're real. Don't let anybody tell you they're not. And
yes,
I
totally 100% agree. Absolutely right.
That to me, in a nonchalant way, just fishing with his grandson and coming out with that statement, and he didn't say no more after that.
Right.
So he was held to secrecy, actually.
Just to fact check myself, those files were deleted from March 45 through December 49. Okay, so we're talking almost 5 years, 4.5 years. So we're not going to find out the truth about Roswell, except we have over 300 deathbed confessions on people who either witnessed the crash scene, helped transport the material from Mac Brazel's ranch to Roswell, transported it from Roswell to Fort Worth, where it was displayed temporarily in front of Major Marcel, and then it was switched with an actual weather balloon. The other thing that's really interesting, and the only other significantly hard piece of evidence we can look at, is that General Ramey, who was in some of the photos with Jesse Marcel, was holding a telex message, and he was holding it like this in his hand. So it was facing the camera. Now, we don't know why he was doing that, other than two possibilities. Either one, he didn't realize what he was doing and didn't think that a camera could maybe capture that. There was only one photographer in the room with him at the time. Or B, he was trying to actually disclose, hey, guess what? This is a lie. So we are now able to look at the original negatives from those photographs, and with computer enhancement, we can read what that telex message says. It talks about victims of a crash.
Has it been totally deciphered? I heard they had a problem with a few words.
Well, it's not 100%. It's the best we can get is a reliable probability, 80 to 85%, that this word is this and this word is this. It does seem to suggest that at least one of the phrases is victims of the crash. Okay. And it does say wreckage. It doesn't say, it does not absolve the government in any way, shape, or form. Right. And the other thing that we can look at is there are at least 5 subsequent stories since the original cover-up, and every single one, we've had to admit, was a lie to cover up the previous one. It wasn't a weather balloon, it was a mogul balloon. Well, it wasn't a mogul balloon, there's a guy named, I think it's Nick Redfern, who did a book called Bodies in the Desert, where supposedly 3 insiders told him that what this was a test by Japanese scientists on prisoners of war from World War II of radiation disease at high altitude. and that the bodies that they found, which contradicts their previous statement that there were no bodies, that the bodies that they found were Asian, and that's why they looked alien to the people that saw it, which immediately contradicts what we had before. And then we know that there are CIA disinformation agents, like the guys that were spreading the lies about the alien communications going on in Arizona. Who was the guy? I'm trying to remember the guy's name that was driven insane by the disinformation agent that was feeding him lies about aliens because he had actually designed his own equipment that actually accidentally was picking up communications from this base that was going to satellites, and they wanted to discredit him, so they told him it was aliens.
I'm
And
not familiar with that story, but yeah.
I'll remember it in a second or two. So we know that we can't get the original information about Roswell, probably, but we have evidence of a cover-up. You can also look at the Kennedy assassination, and there is clear evidence of a CIA cover-up. Did you know the CIA actually had the contract to print Secret Service credentials before that assassination? And that there were multiple people claiming to be Secret Service agents around the grassy knoll who were turning people away, including one police officer who said that the guy who showed him his Secret Service credential did not look like a Secret Service agent. He looked like an auto repairman because he had dirty clothes and wasn't dressed in a suit or anything like it should have been. And we know that even the report, the Warren report that came out, said that there were no Secret Service agents anywhere but in the limousines and along the car route. So we know that, and we also know that the autopsies were completely, I don't know what the word is. I would like to say bollocksed, because that's about the only word I can think of.
Yeah, David, I was in combat, and I know what bullets do, and
Right,
this is a Zapruder
right, right,
showed Kennedy. He got hit in the throat first, and he went over like this, and then his head hit like that, and there's a
right.
splat. And then he went back.
Blew part of his brain back over the back of the limo, which is what Jackie Kennedy went scrambling to go get. Yeah.
But that shot had to come from the front, that from the grassy knoll.
No argument here. So in one of the articles I'm working on right now, I'm trying to list how many possible bullets could have been fired, and it's maybe 7 or 8. It could be more than that. We know Connolly was hit twice. We know that the grains taken off of the magic bullet that was found on one of the stretchers at Parkland Hospital, there are more grains still in his body, that were in his body, than came off of that magic bullet. Okay, so somebody planted that bullet. We know that Ruby was in the hospital, interestingly enough. We know that there was a bullet dug out of the ground opposite the grassy knoll, although it had a trail which led from the Dow Tex building off to the southeast of where the Texas School Book Depository was. This bullet left a furrow in the ground.
Well,
so this was not some guy accidentally shooting his bullet. This thing was coming in a trajectory that somehow missed the limousine. When he dug it up, he handed it to some security guy that he thought was either FBI or Secret Service. We've never seen that bullet.
Yeah.
We know that there was a bullet hole in the windshield.
Yeah.
There were people at the hospital that saw a bullet hole in the windshield until they drove the limousine away. And the very next Monday, this thing was in Dearborn, Michigan at the Ford plant getting a new windshield installed.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a bullet that hit the sidewalk and it wounded a man. He got hit in the leg by
Tag, yes, Tague, yes. And he got hit with some fragment, either from the bullet itself or from the concrete that hit him in the face. Yeah. This is nowhere near the trajectory if you had somebody firing from the School Book Depository. Now, they've claimed that it may have been deflected by a branch. That's not possible. They also claim it could have been deflected by the street light, which may or may not have had a hole in it. That doesn't seem likely either, because it wouldn't have deflected and still had enough energy to chip a fragment up and hit Mr. Tagg in the eye or in the face.
Okay, so the Warren Commission was actually maybe paid off, or they were told to leave.
The Warren Commission was set up deliberately to cover up what was going on. So after you have the assassination, you then have people at Parkland fighting over the body, where at that time, the law was if you have a murder in Texas, Texas takes care of it. But the Secret Service at gunpoint
Yes.
demanded the body back. And at that point, you have doctors who are describing on film an entrance wound in the front of the head and what they thought was an entrance wound at the front, which unfortunately they cut it open to put a tracheotomy in. And their notes included that these were entrance wounds. We also know that Kennedy was hit twice, once in the back, and we think possibly another time in the head, but it's not clear. So he at least was hit 3 times. But the shot that went in the back could not have come out through his throat. It was going downward. By the way, when they did the autopsy at Bethesda, they didn't do the one thing autopsies are supposed to do, which is track where the bullets went. They're supposed to be able to track it so that you can tell where they were fired from. There's no way Oswald in a building looking down at this angle could have shot somebody in the back and that bullet then moved upward and gone out through his neck.
Now,
It's just physically impossible.
Johnson, who was off in another room, and the Secret Service men come to him, and they kept him in the dark for a couple of minutes, and they didn't tell him that Kennedy was dead. Then they finally walked in the room, and they said, "Hi, President Johnson." He said, "What?" He said, "Kennedy's dead." He said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? What's going on?" And he said,
there's evidence that Johnson was on the floor of his limo before the first shot was fired. And there were so many shots, according to people with him in the limo, that he said, "My God, they're going to kill us all."
Yeah.
Like he knew that there were multiple people involved.
Johnson gave the order to take the body back to D.C.
Well, see, okay, so there's another weird thing that's involving the body. When they supposedly have the body going on Air Force Two, it's in a bronze, expensive casket. And it doesn't arrive in Bethesda until 8 o'clock. Sorry, Air Force One. Okay, so it's on Air Force One with Jackie Kennedy, who's still, by the way, in her pink outfit spattered in blood. She wouldn't change her outfit so that Johnson could have a pretty looking ex-president's wife next to her when he took the oath of office, who, by the way, when he took the oath of office, he leaned over and like smirked and winked at a guy behind him who was part of one of his
entourage,
deals. Yeah, that's not the kind of expression you would normally get from somebody who's grieving over his president being killed.
And then that Johnson said to one of those staffers, actually, I heard this too, and I think it's somewhere in a report somewhere, that he turned around one of his staffers. He said, "Les, I want to get sworn in here on the plane here in Dallas before we leave." He said, "Because if I get back to D.C., he said that damn Bobby Kennedy will give me shit about being president."
Yeah. So there's a second plane, Air Force Two, that leapfrogs past Air Force One. At Bethesda, a body arrives in a black body bag in a shipping container. Now, I've heard some people call it a pine box. I don't believe that's what it was. I think it was a metal gray container. When they take that body out, they begin to do the autopsy, and this appears to be Kennedy. Okay, he has what appears to be an entrance wound and in his front, temporal lobe area. And the photographs later show that somebody took what looks like a scalpel and cut a V out of that section so you couldn't tell it was an entrance wound. Okay, that's what the photographs show. There is a photographer that then took other pictures of the body, but those are not the pictures that appear in front of the Warren Commission. And he says, "I know that these weren't my photographs because I used a certain kind of film. This is not the film I used." Not to mention that he marked an X on each of the pictures he took, and those X's are not on that film. We also know that this body shows up at 6:30, and the other body in the other coffin doesn't appear until 8 o'clock. So there's an hour and a half where there's a body at Bethesda we think is we think is Kennedy, but then who's in the bronze casket? So there's another side story to all this where there is one of the most highly respected morticians in Dallas is apparently called to service that afternoon. And he returns the next day and tells his wife, "We have to leave right now." and they pack up and leave, I believe, with their kids, and they never come back to Dallas. This guy's story supposedly is he was on Air Force Two and was working on the body of Officer J.W. Tippit, who looked so much like Kennedy that the people at the police department where he worked used to call him Jack.
Really? I never heard that
And,
one.
and that's the story about why he was killed. And it's possible that the photographs that were submitted to the Warren Commission were not of the body that first showed up, but of the second body who was altered enough to make it look like he was shot, and is the reason why John F. Kennedy's brain was never, I wouldn't say never recovered, was stolen from the National Archives, because they'd be able to prove that that wasn't John F. Kennedy, that was somebody else.
You know, that's an angle I never thought of, that Officer Tibbetts.
There are so many inconsistencies. There is so J.D. Tippit, according to the original police reports, was shot with an automatic weapon, and they found the bullets that were belonging to that weapon, and the police officer marked each one of them with his initial, which is what he was supposed to do according to Dallas police procedure. But when those bullets were shown later, they didn't have a signature on them, and they weren't from a 38. They weren't from an automatic. They were from a revolver like Oswald's.
I thought it was
So Oswald had his 38 revolver with him at the movie theater. He didn't have an automatic. There are total inconsistencies about who the guy was that shot at Tippit. And there are even inconsistencies about whether there's one person or two persons. One lady who witnessed the whole thing says there were two guys, and the guy who did the firing waved him away and then took bullets out and dropped him in the bushes.
Are we
Like
so sure, are we so sure that Oswald wasn't shot with blanks and the whole thing was staged? It sounds scary. This is scary.
Well, okay, so here's another interesting thing. So not too many people are aware of this because this was never covered in the Warren Commission. But 3 weeks before Dallas, there was another assassination attempt against Kennedy in Chicago. And the parallels to what happened in Dallas are striking. There was an ex-Marine who was sort of a loner, who had CIA connections, and what appears to be 3 or 4 Cubans with high-powered weapons who were informed on to the FBI as a possible assassination attempt against Kennedy. We still, to this day, don't know who submitted that report to the FBI. But the FBI heard about this. They put some agents out. There were 2 police officers who were tasked with apprehending this Marine. They both had CIA connections. They both had CIA training, where they were away from the police force for weeks at a time, going through whatever CIA training they were going through. They didn't arrest this guy until a couple of hours after the parade was canceled. Then they picked the guy up.
Yeah, it's all strange.
That's scary. Now, at that point, you'd go, hey, there are active threats against the president. We should double our security. What do? They weaken security. Usually, you have an advanced team go into a town and you set up sniper and observation posts on all the high rises. You make sure that all those windows are closed. You go into those buildings and you tell them, close that damn window. They didn't do any of this. The one guy who was the liaison between the Pentagon and the Secret Service, guess where he was on November 22nd? He was sent to South Pole. He was sent to the South Pole to get him out of the country.
Secret base.
So, well, no, not a secret base. He was just said, get out of here. We'll take care of this ourselves. They usually use extra troops, extra military to help spread out the coverage. They specifically told them, we don't want you for this. They should have had running boards out for the Secret Service to be standing on them. They specifically didn't do that. And there's the really famous video of the one guy who's going to jump on the back and hold on to the handrails. And he was ordered by the Secret Service not to do that. No, and he goes, what? I'm trying to do my job.
He just told his story here a while back. And Kennedy didn't want the bubble over the, bulletproof bubble over the car. And he said he didn't want that. He wanted open air. He wanted to wave at the people and everything.
Right.
they're clouding this situation up with disinformation. They said the Russians were involved. They said the mafia was involved. They said Cuba was involved. And so all of this is just a big smokescreen to throw us all
No,
off
no, no,
course.
no. Okay, back up a little. Were
Okay.
the Russians involved? Almost definitely not. Were Cubans involved? Yes, Cubans were involved, not Cuba, but we go back to the Bay of Pigs. This is where George Herbert Walker Bush's name comes into prominence here. A lot of people don't realize he was one of the main organizers for the Bay of Pigs invasion. When Kennedy denied using naval and marine assets or Air Force attacks, the CIA used one of their covert operatives, a guy named George Herbert Walker Bush, an oil man from Houston, to use CIA funds to buy two ships to basically act as the launching platforms for the ex-Cubans who were going to invade in the Bay of Pigs. We know it was George H.W. Bush because he named one of those ships the Barbara, which happened to be Barbara Bush's name, and he named the other one the Houston. And he called the operation Operation Zapata. Why is Operation Zapata important? Because George Bush's oil company's name was Zapata Oil. Well, Zapata Piping. And he had an ongoing contract to do oil drilling just offshore of Cuba.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So here's George Herbert Walker Bush, who's using his name for his oil company because he wants to take credit when this thing goes right. And when it goes badly, he's pissed.
Yeah.
Okay. So
remind me, what did Bush start off? Did he start off as a congressman or senator, and then he went to CIA director?
He lost, I believe, his election for Senate twice. He was supposedly a hero from World War II because his was the only torpedo bomber that was not, he was the only torpedo bomber pilot that survived one of the waves at Midway.
And he's only 19 years old. Yeah.
He was very young, yes. So he survived that. And then he, for some reason, gets mixed up with the CIA, but partly that's because of his father, Prescott Bush, who was actually working with the Nazis during World War II to a point where they had to stop his bank from working with the Nazis in 1942 after we had already entered the war against the Nazis.
Wasn't Bush involved in the Majestic 12?
We're not sure if Majestic 12 is real or not. The evidence seems to be the classic description of disinformation, which is some truth and a lot of lies, so that you can't tell what the truth is, and you might believe the lie, which then makes you upset later on when you feel like you've been taken. Okay, so is Prescott Bush's name, I believe, is involved with Majestic 12 or MJ12. There's no evidence that there was a Majestic 12, but we know that George H.W. Bush then becomes the very first CIA director without actually having any official CIA involvement whatsoever, which is a very, very strange situation indeed. We also know that a George Bush called from Dallas the afternoon of the assassination to the FBI and reported in as a oil man from Houston. And the reason he called the FBI was because that was the CIA's way of telling Hoover, we're going to blame this on you. Now, one of the things that it's more recently come out with is all of the connections that not just that George Herbert Walker Bush had with the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban assassin teams that came out of that. But we've also found out that Oswald appears to have been working for the FBI to infiltrate that group of CIA people. And there is now a declassified FBI memo written by Hoover himself, or at least one that he signed, where he says that there are problems involving what he called was rogue Cuban misguided Cuban emigre patriots. I believe that's the phrasing he used. It was some weird phrasing where he's talking about the assassination squads, the people that were then being used to try to kill Castro. and training in Florida and Louisiana, training sites which Oswald visited. Hold on, Cat wants something.
Yeah.
Yes, what? Yes, hold on.
Kitty,
So
kitty cat time. Yeah.
we also know, and one of the things that we're hoping to see in this release of documents, maybe possibly, but don't hold your breath, we're hoping that there may be more information about how the CIA and the FBI were aware of Oswald as early as 1959. You got to remember, this is a guy who he wasn't an idiot. When he was in the Marines, he was actually working in Japan doing satellite work tracking the U-2 spy planes. And he spoke fluent Russian. This is not an idiot. And he was an excellent shot.
Yeah.
But when he goes to Russia, they realize he's probably a plant. So they ship him off to Minsk. They don't let him stay in Moscow where he wants to be. And he realizes, well, I'm not going to get much done here. So he finally comes back to America. Now, this is a guy with classified knowledge who absconds basically to Moscow. And then when he comes back, nobody debriefs him. Nobody interrogates him. They don't arrest him for, possibly giving up U.S. secrets. It's like he was known to have gone there because he was part of some plot.
And another cover up. They painted him as a big loser. I mean, like a lousy
Oh
loser.
yeah. Now it's interesting that when he was in Russia, they had some sort of firearms contest, and he deliberately did poorly because apparently he didn't want people to think he was trained to be a sniper while he was in Russia. But when he was in the Marines, he was an expert marksman.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have lost that in 2 years.
Right. Yeah, they set it up. A parallel to presidents, President Trump, he had an uncle that was actually went into Tesla's apartment when he died with the FBI, and they were taking all of his documents and all of his scientific stuff. And so,
I've heard that accusation. I can't say that that's true. I know that some government people did go into Tesla's files and take a lot of his files. That's true. Who that was, I'm not sure. Some people have claimed, this is how bizarre that story gets, that the whole idea behind the monkey cartoon character, George.
yeah, George of the Jungle.
No, not George of the Jungle. The monkey that lives in New York with the guy in the yellow hat.
Oh, yeah.
That George. That George was supposed to be George Bush, except he would have had to have been like -8 years old when that happened. So that couldn't have been him. But yeah, I don't believe that there are plenty of connections between the Bush family and Nazis in World War II, along with the CIA, which was the OSS in World War II. And after World War II, you had both John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles, who appeared to have been laundering money both for themselves and for Nazi interests, like Gerhard Faber, who made the chemical compound that gassed the Jews in the Holocaust camps.
Right.
And their efforts to bring Nazis into the U.S. under something called Operation Paperclip, which was basically giving false, cleansed background histories to a number of these Nazis who probably, definitely should have been up on war crimes trials.
Uri Geller told me about Werner von Braun.
With that was the CIA, which was created in 1947, and NASA with Werner von Braun.
Yeah, Werner von Braun. Uri Geller told me about von Braun in New Mexico, Sandia, and he had alien bodies there, and he had pieces of the wreckage in the safe. So he knew a little bit about what was going on. The other thing about Trump, I have a friend of mine, Troy Anderson, who wrote a book, The Trump Code. And the Trump Code, it goes back to a book back in 1892, in which it says Barron's greatest adventures, and it was written by a guy named Lockwood. And this is about a story about a young man who's got a dad who becomes president, and he has a tower in New York. And now they're saying that they think that Trump is the time traveler. And what I'm leading up to, I know you're going to laugh about that, but okay. But here's the thing. I'm gonna get back into what you know more about the CIA. didn't they have Project Looking Glass, and don't they have time travel technology? They,
We can do experiments now with subatomic particles where it proves that not time travel, but teleportation
yeah,
is possible.
yeah.
We can do that because there's something called spooky action at distance, where you have like an up quark and a down quark, and once they're created, they are forever linked no matter the distance. And if you affect one of these paired particles, the other one instantly reacts to it faster than the speed of light. This was something Einstein says should not be possible. That's why he called it spooky action at a distance.
Hmm.
We've been able to do that in tests. We cannot come anywhere close to actually teleporting real matter like an apple or a person. So, no, we don't have that. The evidence behind the Philadelphia experiment, that's all been proved to have been a really good story. The interesting thing behind that was that involved the Navy at a time in World War II where they employed several of the greatest science fiction writers of all time, including Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, and a young writer by the name of, what's his name? L. Ron Hubbard,
Yeah, Ron Hud.
who tried to write science fiction himself, and he was terrible at it. And then he realized, hey, I could make a lot more money creating a false religion. So he created Scientology.
Yeah.
So all three of those guys were all working at the same time. And it's possible, although we can't prove this, it's possible that they created the whole idea behind the Philadelphia experiment just to see what the Germans would think, or the Russians for that matter. We're pretty sure that what was going on was something called degaussing, where they had these giant cables on ships to try to remove the magnetic signature so that they would not be so attractive to magnetic mines.
They wanted to be invisible. Yeah. And that was in
Oh,
1940.
no, 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 no. Not invisible, just not as attractive to magnetic mines. The invisibility thing is just a red hair.
Okay. So they said the ship did go invisible. The story goes, the documentary. Uh,
It's a story. Like I said, we had three great science fiction writers all in close proximity. They might have come up with some really good stories, but it's just a story.
it's the story. Hey,
Again, if we had secret technology that could make ships invisible 80 years ago, don't you think we'd be using it against the Chinese and the Russians right now?
well, no, I want to tell you a little theory about that. My theory is that the
Okay.
elites, the shadow government has all this technology, and they don't want to show us that technology because they're using that technology against us. Does that make sense?
Okay, it's an interesting theory. But like I showed you before with the F-117 and the Apache helicopter in the Balkan War, our military, our Pentagon, will trot out things as soon as they think they're even close to being ready, and they're almost always not ready enough. And if we had any kind of technology that was able to hover silently or go invisible, we have used it already. Oh, here's another example. Here's another great story for you. So there is when I was talking before about um, the 2017 UAP videos. I've done extensive research on this. If you go to my PDF file, there's 7 different articles I've written about the 2017 UAP videos and the 2 other ones that came out real close afterwards. All of those are prosaic, ordinary, normal things that not only that the Pentagon should have known about, but deliberately kept mum on because they were trying to confuse the situation. And they wanted to confuse our adversaries, i.e. Russia and China, about what our capabilities are, whether or not we're back engineering technology. Okay, so later in 2017, there is this incident that the website thedrive.com covers extensively, where a white, supposedly tic-tac object is spotted screaming out of southwestern Nevada, heading for California. It then makes a right-hand turn at faster than the speed of sound, so we're talking not commercial airliner, and starts overtaking commercial airliners going north to Portland and Seattle. And it's on radar when it first leaves Nevada and goes through California airspace, and then it goes off of radar. But it's still visible to the pilots and the crew of these commercial airliners as it continues going north. It is such a threat that the FAA calls in the military, and somebody with a redacted code word tells the FAA, get your planes out of the way. We're sending up armed F-15s. And it makes us look stupid because the pilots and the FAA don't know what to do. Do we go high? Do we go low? Do we go left or right? They didn't know. Now, this all happens in, I want to say, October of 2017. Immediately, there is some information because somebody heard the FAA talking to the pilots. So there's some investigation. Normally, the FAA drags its feet like they're chained to an anvil when they have to release information. A perfect example is the Stephenville incident, where they lied repeatedly over and over in court because they didn't want to release the data. This time, bingo, here's everything. Not only everything, here's some stuff you didn't even ask for, and they get the radar transepts of this flight, and they get the voice recordings from the FAA and the pilots and the guy on the ground with the military, whose designation is redacted, all talking about this thing. They let this thing out of the bag like they wanted it to come out.
I want to ask you about a couple of
Wait, hold on. So this happens in February. On March 1st, Vladimir Putin comes out and says, oh, you may have UFO technology. We have stealth, cruise, nuclear-powered missiles. And he makes this big deal about his stealth cruise missiles with nuclear power. And his PowerPoint presentation doesn't show them attacking New York or Washington, D.C. It shows them attacking Florida, primarily somewhere near Mar-a-Lago, because he's trying to intimidate Trump. So what this was a coordinated, simultaneous release, only a few months apart, between the 2017 videos, which, by the way, never showed a tic-tac object, and this description by a pilot. The pilot never took any photographs because he didn't have the weapon systems installed on his FAA team. He only had a visual description of what he saw. The photographs that were taken in that supposedly the same area, although we can't prove that, were taken by a different airplane on a different flight sometime later. We don't know how much later. And the other pilot of the second plane flying with David Fraser didn't see what he saw. She only saw this for a few seconds. So this whole thing that Commander Fravor says he saw on the water, nobody else saw and no one took a picture of.
I wanted to ask you a while ago, the cabal and the New World Order, you said, why wouldn't they break out the new technology in the case of a war? Well, haven't you heard that there's a lot of elites and the New World Order wants to get rid of 2/3 of the population? So in case we get into wars, they don't care. They
No. The elites need the population to buy all their crap to keep them an elite.
Well, who is it then?
You don't have to even look at the New World Order anymore. We have the New World Order. Look at all the billionaires in the current administration. When he had his inauguration, the front row was Elon Musk, Zuckerberg's girlfriend, and one of the other guys, the guy that runs Amazon.
Yeah, that's
those guys were in the front row. The cabinet appointees were in the second row. So Trump was basically saying, these are the guys running the country. Those guys, yeah, they're back row people.
Yeah.
So we don't have to look for the Illuminati. You don't have to worry about the Knights Templar or the Freemasons. The ones who are running the country are the billionaires, because they're creating laws to allow them to have even more wealth than they had before. You know what Musk's net worth was in 2000, I want to say 4, it was $2 billion. You know what his net worth is today?
Yeah, 350 something billion.
450 something billion.
Really? Okay, here's another thing about the elites, though. There's more rich people in the elites. You got the kings and queens, and you got the Pope, and all of them involved in this, in running the world. And you got the rich banks. And I heard that they're worth $60 trillion. They're holding $60 trillion in assets all around the world, like BlackRock and all these other, Mainstream and Main Street, I think.
Well, people like Zuckerberg and Musk, they found a great way to evade the system. This will show you how they're not patriots, by the way. Rather than paying taxes, and by the way, they've had their tax cuts from Trump's first administration. And that tax cut was basically paid for by the rest of us, the 99 point something percent that aren't millionaires. he and the other people that own vast sums of money own what are basically just stocks. They buy stuff, but they only buy it by taking out loans against the value of their stocks. That way, they only have to pay the loan value, which is usually 8% or less. And because they are such great customers, they usually get an agreed upon lower rate, which can be as low as 3%. So instead of him paying taxes on what he gets, he just gets stock and then takes out a loan against the stock and uses that money and then just pays the loan amount. So he's not paying 25 or 28%. He's paying 3 to 5%.
Okay.
Same thing with
Yeah.
Zuckerberg.
4 years ago, David, the Democrats had all the billionaires in their pockets. They had them. And Soros funded a lot of Democrat DAs, judges, and everything else across the country. So Soros is very corrupt, and he's been involved with the Democrats for some time.
Well,
And
you say he's corrupt. If he's I would argue anybody who's a billionaire doesn't need to have more than 1 billion. That's just, call me a socialist if you want, but after $1 billion, you don't need anything more. What more do you?
I wouldn't shoot. I mean,
If you've got a company like Amazon where the owner is worth $200 billion, but he says he can't afford to pay a decent wage or overtime or childcare for his employees, he's a damn liar. And he's a greedy, money sucking damn liar.
don't care
Guy
about people.
not only has a yacht, but the yacht is so big, he has to have a second yacht to drive him from the port to his big yacht out in the bay. That's how rich these people are.
Now, didn't Silicon Valley support the Democrats, and actually Zuckerberg and the rest of them were talking about some of the corrupt things that were said? They told them to stop the information, and they actually told them to forget about the First Amendment. Stop the other side. That's the MAGA side. Stop them from getting in on Facebook and Twitter and all this other until.
Well, okay, so starting with the Trump administration, there's been this fractious relationship between the MAGA wing of the Republican Party and social media. And it was clear that the MAGA wing had been co-opted by a group that wanted to divide the country. Okay? We've always had a divide. It started back in the Nixon administration. It got worse in the Reagan administration. It got much worse during the run up to the 2016 election, where it's been demonstrably proved over and over again.
I have to tell you, Obama divided this country more than any president.
Who did?
Obama.
Oh, because he was born as a black man.
No.
All right, you know what? We're getting into politics. I'm going to back us out of that. We'll save all this for later.
Yeah. Another show. This is for entertainment purposes only. Okay.
Yep. No real world politics need apply. So I was going to say that with the Kennedy assassination, these documents that we're going to get are not going to show us a lot of the evidence that we really want. Just like we're never going to get the kind of evidence that we really want about UFOs and disclosure. We first talked, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago, and you were asking me how soon is disclosure, and I said we're never going to get disclosure from our government. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
How many times have you personally heard in the last 4 or 5 years how disclosure was right around the corner? Before the end of the month, before the end of the year, it never happens. Now,
we talked about Dr. Greer, David. Dr. Greer was supposed to have a disclosure 10 days ago with 20.
Dr. Greer was caught falsifying his Close Encounter 5 encounter groups in Florida when he had a light plane dropping flares as people were practicing their CE5 calling of a UFO. Ever since then, I have not had a very high regard for Dr. Greer's testimony.
I think he plays both sides of the coin, too.
Too many people. And so if you know anything about Harry Houdini spent almost all his life as an adult trying to find one honest medium, somebody that could really communicate to the dead, because he desperately wanted to talk to his mother. And he could never find one. He wound up spending the last 20, 30 years of his life exposing fake after fake after fake. Now, I've met only a handful of people that I would claim, that I would believe 100% that they really did experience what they did. But there are so many charlatans, there are so many disinformation experts or agents David Wilcox, who used to be a big deal in the UFO community with Corey Good and the other guy, he was shown to basically just be promoting falsehoods. Remember how there were these giant Jupiter-sized UFOs that were coming towards Earth because they saw them on with this one radar screen? What this was it was a glitch on a solar observatory satellite. And this glitch has a certain limited size of a pixel. And they saw this square box that was a fault of the satellite in the transmission of data. And they said, ha, there is a Borg the size of Jupiter real close to the sun. And the streamers that come out from the sun, it's pulling out energy from the sun. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Oh, and I wanted, it was Jeff Bezos.
Celebrities for a long while. Yeah. And it finally came out that they were just lying through their teeth.
Yeah, we got a timeline here, but Jeff Bezos was the tight ass about with his employees. I just thought of that, and I wanted to come back.
Yeah. Well, the billionaires have decided they can make a lot more money with the Republicans than they can with the Democrats, so they've gone pretty much all whole hog over to the right side of the
There were 4 years with the other side, so we're kind of splitting them up a little bit.
It was balanced. It was balanced. I would say that some people have gone that way. Oh, so I want to just leave you with this one thing. So there's a bunch of stuff that people can come out and look at. These are things that we'll never know about the Kennedy assassination. There are 3 incidents that I think, if the U.S. government was really serious about giving us disclosure about UFOs, here's 3 evidences that they're not serious about giving us disclosure, because they could release this information and it wouldn't jeopardize security, it wouldn't jeopardize black programs or anything like that. One is, who deleted those ingoing and outgoing transmissions from Roswell and why? Okay, because somebody deliberately did that to cover up whatever happened. If they don't want to reveal what happened, I understand. But they could at least say, hey, we did this to cover something up. We can't talk about what we covered up because you guys would go bat crazy, but here's why and how and when and who. But they won't do that because that will admit there was a cover-up about Roswell, and that all of the other things, including the Air Force case closed from 1997, are all just lies. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is the very famous Phoenix Lights event, which was, I think, 97?
Yeah, it was
March 97? So you have a giant chevron-shaped, V-shaped UFO seen across 3 states by over 800 people up till about 8 o'clock. It flies down to Phoenix and then turns around and flies back. At 10 o'clock, there is something way out to the west of Phoenix on the other side of the mountain range that separates the city from the military bases out there. And that thing is dropping flares. And when you do a search now of Phoenix Lights on Google search for images, that's the vast majority of the images you see are these flares. And somebody was able to take a picture from the same direction that video was taken at in the daytime, and you can match up where these lights disappear, and they're disappearing because they're dropping behind the mountain range to the west. This was a military operation. So you wouldn't be breaking any tremendous secrets if you just say, I ordered this, and this was the vehicle that was used. Was it a helicopter? Was it a plane? We don't know. And we admit that we were doing this to confuse people about what really happened earlier that day.
Why did this big craft fly over something like 200 miles of Arizona? And the ex-governor said he saw it, and he's the witness to it now after he got out of the office. Yeah.
Well, no, he admitted it the next morning, and then he brought a guy from his staff in an alien suit saying, oh, we've got one of the people from the craft, because he wanted to make a joke about it. It wasn't until 10 years later, after he was out of office, that he said, yeah, I saw it too. And it wasn't lights, it wasn't the flares, it was the real UFO. Okay. So yeah, his name is Fife Symington, by the way.
That's right. That's okay. The name.
So that's true. So they could reveal that. And the third, and I'll do it real quick, is an event called the Shag Harbor incident, where something with lights on it crashed into the water off of Shag Harbor in Canada, and it was witnessed by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police with lights still on under the water, and it had released some kind of yellow-green foam 4 inches thick. And they then sent divers in there thinking it might have been an airplane, and they couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
And according to one story, a second craft with lights on came up to the first craft, and they both then left after some time and headed off in the direction of a U.S. base where they did secret listening for Soviet submarines.
So now the
So
confusion just keeps going, doesn't it? Yeah.
So if the government was serious, and until they release those three items, we know they're not being serious, and we know we're not going to get real disinformation. We're just going to get. Did you see that crazy, stupid UFO alien egg thing that came out last week?
Yeah, I did.
Oh God, I swear. Okay,
well, Greer said that's real.
Yeah, it's a real fake, is what it is. You know what it actually is, and when you look at it the next time, you can prove me right or wrong. This is an egg that has a string duct taped to it, because that patch on there has all the earmarks of exactly what duct tape looks like when you rip it off.
Yeah, they
It
did.
has a crosshatch pattern. It has those little bits of thread. It's duct tape on an egg. It's not a balloon or a helicopter. It's an egg.
Yeah, they damn sure didn't show very good pictures of it, just way down below where it was put.
Yeah.
But also
anonymous too. Oh, by the way, no one's going to come forward and risk their career claiming this is an actual alien craft.
Yeah, but it's almost like these Bigfoot videos. You know, they're always shaky cameras, and the cameras are up and down.
That one Bigfoot video, the very first one, the very first film.
Right.
Yeah. I can't say that's wrong. No. I can't say that's fake. I can't say that that's a person in a costume. That's one of the very most real things I've ever seen. As far as and next time we have a talk, I will tell you what the difference is between Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and I'll tell you about my encounter with Sasquatch and why they're very, very not much Bigfoot. They're very possibly something much more strange and different than that.
Extraterrestrial. That's what I've been hearing.
Extraterrestrial with abilities to manipulate space and time.
Yeah. We're about ready to close out. An hour and a half has actually went by very fast. And
plus the 40 minutes we talked about before we actually started recording.
Yeah, we did. We about 35. But I wanted to ask you one last question about these drones. Bottom line, with what you and I both talked about through back and forth. Bottom line, David, what do you think? Are they ETs involved in this stuff, the drone phenomena?
Well, the vast majority from the people who have observed all the video, Adam Kinzinger, who was an Air Force pilot, says that he had not seen anything that could not have been explained as regular drones or airplanes. Oh, yeah. And Adam Kinzinger has more experience with the Air Force than I do. I will say, like I said before, I have witnessed orbs. I have witnessed orbs that were absolutely not anything explanatory. They were not drones. They were not Chinese lanterns. They were not airplanes. They were not reflections. They were technically UFOs, unexplained, brilliant orbs less than 200 feet away that blinked out when I went from one side of a tree to the other side of a tree with no sound. So I will say that it's possible, absolutely possible, that there might be orbs mixed in with this.
Right.
But I think the real culprit behind this is the CIA's Red Cell team, and they're trying to prove that we are vulnerable to drone waves. Which, by the way, you don't need to have the CIA tell you this. Just ask any Russian that's working in an oil factory in somewhere in Minsk or someplace else, because they can tell you they ain't ready to defend anything.
I've seen 6 up-close UFOs in my time. And I've met a couple of ETs, and one of them was an Asian woman. She was a shapeshifter. Apparently, she shaped into, this Japanese gal, and she come to my house 5 months later. So I proved that my point that she was real ET, and my cousin there was with me, and he saw the whole thing. So I had that.
By the way, also one more thing: if these were really alien craft, you can bet we'd be flying jets up there and trying to shoot these things down, because we would desperately like to capture some alien technology. Well, and the fact that we don't have any military engagement with these things officially tells me that this is CIA.
They do have choppers and jets every once in a while. They've taken pictures of choppers and jets at night following these orbs or whatever.
Some of the bases are locations where jets and choppers fly from.
Yeah, maybe so. Okay, we're gonna have to close out the show, and we got a lot to talk about. We need to do a current events, or what they call current events.
We haven't even started on the Knights Templar, the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, all of which I'm going to cover in upcoming articles on the website, theconspiracyreport.com.
And also the examples of the truth that aren't the truth that aren't Moses and the ark. And
Oh,
we're
I've been
good.
researching whether or not Moses actually existed. And
Yeah,
if Moses didn't actually exist, then what about the Ark of the Covenant?
yeah, yeah. The whole thing. All right, David White. Thank you so much for being back on.
Woo.
It's been a while.
And remember, all the politics discussed in this are just theoretical, have no connection in reality to the real world that we live in.
And David and I are just like several other my buddies that are different, political persuasion. I get along with people. I want to get along with people. I want to be able to share opinions and this and that. I think we did a good job of sharing our opinions.
Both of us really want the truth. That's
Yeah,
all it is.
that's
Just
it,
want.
basically. And we're not getting the truth from no
That
politician.
was the
None of them.
mistake, or maybe it was intentional with the TV series The X Files. The poster behind Mulder's desk said, "I want to believe."
Yeah.
Not "I want the truth." It's "I want to believe." And that's what the UFO community is going through now. It's not getting the facts, it's being given things that they have to believe. And that's not good enough.
MUFON never done much for me. I mean, so I don't know. I guess they've lost a lot of their power, their connections. But Dave,
They did quite a lot for Bob Bigelow, I can tell you that.
David White's a guest that just full of knowledge, and we cover a lot of topics. A guy that has more topics than I can even think of. We can just keep going and going and going. But David White, thank you so much for being on The Strange Reality with Dave Emmons. And I want to tell everybody out there, I hope you enjoy the show. Watch the show. It was a good one. It
And
was.
sign up for the newsletter if you get a chance.
And now I'll have that in the narrative. I'll have that posted in the narrative, and people can see it, and they'll sign up for that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thank you, David White. And good
Keep
night.
watching the skies.
Right. Yeah.